Good afternoon. My name is Rabbi Amy Bardak. On behalf of the Jewish Federation of Greater Pittsburgh, and along with my colleague Joe Enton, we would like to welcome you to this commemorative Torah study session. Before we begin, I would like to let you know that this session is being recorded and will be posted on our website. So we ask you to be mindful of your camera and to remain on mute. Today, we honor the lives lost and the people affected by the attack on three congregations, Dor Hadash, New Light, and Tree of Life, Or LaSimcha, on October 27th, 2018, the 18th of Cheshvan, 5779. Our Torah study today is dedicated in memory of the 11 people who perished on this day 2 years ago. We are going to share the screen with their names. Please rise if you are able as we recite their names. Joyce Feinberg, Edith Baltacha, Bat Abba Menachem Vechinka. Richard Gottfried, Yosef Ben Chaim. Rose Mallinger, Razel Bat Avraham. Jerry Rabinowitz, Yehuda Ben Yechezkel Vaselma. Cecil Rosenthal, Cecil Chaim Ben Eliezer. David Rosenthal, David Ben Eliezer. Bernice Simon, Bela Rachel Bat Moshe. Sylvan Simon, Zalman Shachna Ben Menachem Mendel. Daniel Stein, Daniel Avraham Ben Baruch. Melvin Wax, Moshe Gadol Ben Yosef. And Irving Younger, Yitzchak Chaim Ben Menachem. Zichronam Livracha, may their memories be a blessing. You may be seated. David Shapiro will be introducing our scholar, Rabbi Leon Morris. David is a past chair of the Jewish Federation of Greater Pittsburgh and served as chair of the Independent Committee, which distributed the funds collected after the attack to the victims. David is also a leader and learner at the Pardes Institute of Jewish Studies. Welcome, David.
Thank you very much, Rabbi. It's really an honor for me to introduce Leon today. Really for two reasons. One is as a member of the committee that distributed the funds after the tragedy. One of the things I think all of us learned was the importance of Torah and Torah study in terms of giving us the wisdom of how to proceed with the work of our committee. And the second is that Leon is actually sort of a Pittsburgher. He grew up in Connellsville, PA, went to Pitt, has had a very distinguished career and is now the head of Pardes Institute, which my family are big supporters, and really had a meaningful effect on the life of my daughter, Deborah. So Leon, it is an honor to introduce you, and I think we want to hear from you and not me, so take it away.
Thank you, David. It's incredibly meaningful for me to be with you today, joining you from Jerusalem. And I was last in Pittsburgh about a month before the attack, and I haven't had the opportunity to come back to Pittsburgh since then. So thank you for giving me this opportunity to honor the memories of those who were killed. It's additionally meaningful to be with you, to be introduced by my friend David Shapiro, and a dear friend of Pardes, and a wonderful paradigm yourself of a lifelong commitment to Jewish learning. So thank you. Our question today is, what does it mean to embody Torah? What would it mean to be a human Torah? Or another way to ask it would be, in what way is the human being like a Sefer Torah, like a Torah scroll? How can one embody Torah in their life? And how does one embody Torah in their death? And I want to begin with a narrative that weaves its way through the Tanakh, mostly through the Torah, but a little bit of Nevi'im, which I've been fascinated with for many years, which is the story of Joseph's bones. So Joe, I'll ask you, let's look at the first text together. We'll share screen. So at the end of the book of Bereshit, of Genesis, Joseph is about to die, and he has his brothers take an oath that one day when they leave Egypt, they will carry their bones out of Egypt and bring him back to the land of Israel. You'll remember that their father Yaakov, Jacob, they brought back to the land of Israel, but Joseph dies in Egypt. And these are the last psukim, the last verses of the book of Genesis. So in verse 25, right, we read, Vayishba Yosef et bnei Yisrael lemor, Joseph made them take an oath, saying, Pakod yifkod Elohim etchem, when God has taken notice of you, you shall carry up my bones from here. And then we read, Joseph died at the age of 110. He was embalmed. This is the only place in the Tanakh where this word occurs. And he was placed in a coffin in Egypt. And there ends the book of Genesis. And we don't hear about Joseph's bones again until we get to the Exodus from Egypt, Parashat Bishalach. And in Exodus chapter 13, we'll just scroll down to text number 2. Everybody's busy leaving Egypt. The children of Israel have just been allowed by Pharaoh to go. And suddenly there's one person who remembers this oath that was made generations ago, some 400 years earlier, with Joseph to take his bones out of Egypt. And that person is, not surprisingly, Moshe Rabbeinu. So we read in verse 19, Vayikach Moshe et atzamot Yosef imo, and Moses took with him the bones of Joseph, who had exacted an oath from the children of Israel, saying, and here the text in Exodus chapter 13 reminds us of the exact wording that Joseph had used in saying, Pakod yifkod Elohim etchem, va'alitem et atzmotai mizeh itchem. That God will surely take notice of you, and then take notice meaning will respond, will answer the promise of bringing you to the land of Israel. And when that happens, don't forget my bones. Don't forget to carry my bones with me. The final place that we have a mention of Joseph's bones in the Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible, is our source number 3 here. In the book of Joshua, this is the first book in the prophets, in Nevi'im. We learn that, when they got to Eretz Yisrael, when they got to the land of Israel, they had Joseph's bones with them. And you'll see verse 32, the bones of Joseph, which the Israelites had brought up from Egypt, were buried in Shechem, that's modern day Nablus, in the piece of ground which Jacob had bought for 100 pesetas from the children of Hamor. So the Midrash, the rabbinic imaginative expansion of the text, can have a heyday here because there's so much we don't know. There are so many questions that we could ask. One of the questions that the Midrash will ask is, how did Moses know where Joseph's bones were? And the Midrash itself is fascinated by the visuals here. When you piece together source number 2, that Moses remembered to get Joseph's bones, and source number 3, that 40 years later, when they enter the land of Israel, they bury Joseph's bones in Shechem, and you fill in that scene, you have an incredible story of the journey of Joseph's bones with the children of Israel for 40 years through the desert. And the Midrash is sensitive, and we'll see this inside the Midrash itself in a moment in source number 4. The Midrash is sensitive to the visuals and sensitive to the fact that Joseph's bones aren't the only thing that they're carrying with them for 40 years through the desert. What's the other thing that they're carrying with them? They're carrying the Ark of the Covenant. They're carrying the Ark that contains the Luchot Habrit, the tablets of the law. And the Midrash picks up on the fact that in Hebrew, the word for coffin and the word for ark is the same word, aron. It's a cabinet. And so we'll go to source 4. This is one form of the Midrash. This is actually an Agadah from the Talmud. And we'll look at 2 different rabbinic imaginative expansions of this scene of going through the desert with these 2 arks, one containing the 10 Commandments and the other Joseph's bones. So, so here, first, I just want to get to the second paragraph where it says, the Gemara asks. So this is a beautiful passage. How did Moses know where Joseph was buried? Well, the rabbis are very sensitive to the fact that in the genealogies that we often skip over or zone out a bit when we get to them, in this listing of names of those who went down to Egypt and those who left Egypt, a span of more than 400 years, there's one name on that list that occurs on both lists, and that is Serach bat Asher, Serach, the daughter of Asher. So she takes on in the Midrash this amazing persona of the wise old woman who carries the secrets of generations earlier, and she's the one who is able to indicate to Moses where it is Joseph's bones are. So we'll just read this for a moment. And where did Moses, our teacher, know where Joseph was buried? The sages say Sarah, daughter of Asher, remained from that generation that initially descended to Egypt with Jacob. Moses went to her and said to her, "Do you know anything about where Joseph is buried?" And she said to him, "The Egyptians fashioned a metal casket for him and set it in the Nile River so that its water would be blessed." Now, this is like the Midrash just wants to make it even more dramatic because it's a much better story of finding Joseph's bones if, in fact, they're at the bottom of the Nile River in a metal coffin. So the Midrash continues that Moses stood on the bank of the Nile and he said, "Joseph, Joseph, the time has arrived about which the Holy One, blessed be he, took an oath, saying, I will redeem you. And the time for fulfillment of that oath you administered to the Jewish people, that they will bury you in the land of Israel, has arrived. So if you show yourself, it is good, but if not, we are clear, we're exempt from the oath." And immediately the casket of Joseph floated to the top of the water. Moses took it and brought it over to himself. So that is this somewhat fanciful, mythic, powerful story. It's worth noting in the week before an election that this is a responsibility that Moses as a leader might have delegated to someone else. He, after all, is leading the entire children of Israel out of Egypt, but he takes it upon himself. The Midrash elsewhere says that This is why Moses himself merits being buried by God on Mount Moab, because he took such care to go after the bones of Joseph and to gather them together. Joe will just continue down a little bit further in that text. So this is the part that I really want to get to in addressing the question that I'm asking: in what way is the human being like a Torah scroll? So here's the scene, right? And all those years that the Jewish people were in the wilderness, these two arks, one, an ark, a casket of a dead man, Joseph, and one, the ark of the Shekhinah, of the divine presence, were traveling together. And passersby would say, what is the nature of these two arks? And they, that is Moses and his colleagues, would say to the people asking, why are you carrying these two arks side by side? Why do you carry a coffin with Joseph's bones next to the Ark of the Covenant? And they would answer, this one fulfilled everything that's written in this other one. So the Hebrew here is kiyem zeh kol ma shekatuv bazeh. And I want to look with you at a midrash, a different midrash from the Mechilta, one of the earliest collections of midrashim from the Tanaitic period, the 1st and 2nd century, which wants to fill this in. In other words, here in Masechet Sota, in Tractate Sota, we have this beautiful ending of these two arks are carried side by side because the one whose bones are in this ark fulfilled what's written inside the other ark. The Mechilta, in its development of the Midrash, wants to really prove that, wants to prove based on the story of Joseph, how is it that he fulfilled everything that's written on the tablets inside that other ark? So let's go to source number 5. And here we'll jump down to where it says section 6. Okay, so we have, again, just before the number 6, you'll see we have the same statement as the previous midrash. He who lies in this ark fulfills what's written in what lies in the other ark. But here the midrash really wants to develop it, and it's beautiful, and it is a beautiful case of interpretation and midrash, and a very close reading of biblical verses, and repurposing some of those verses in the story of Joseph to prove the point that he literally fulfilled each of the 10 commandments. We won't go through all of these, but I'd like to go through some of them because I think it's a beautifully constructed midrash. So it goes through each of the 10 commandments plus, and we'll see the plus in a moment. So here we're looking again where the little number 6 is. In what lies in the other ark, it's written, the first commandment, I am the Lord your God. And of Joseph, it's written that Joseph says, am I in the place of God? So that shows that Joseph observed the first commandment. The context of Joseph saying, am I in the place of God, is when his brothers assume that he's going to exact revenge. And he says to them, am I in the place of God? In this ark, in what lies in this ark, it's written, you shall have no other gods, right? The second commandment. And of Joseph, it's written that he says, it is God whom I fear. He says this to his brothers before he reveals himself, when he tells them to go back and get their younger brother, Benjamin. In this ark, it says, you shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. Third commandment. And of Joseph, it's written, by the life of Pharaoh, meaning when he takes an oath, he doesn't say, I swear to God. He says, I swear by Pharaoh's name. And so that shows that during his life, he was very punctilious about not taking God's name in vain. Here's one that's a bit of a stretch, because the construction of this midrash, you have to get to all 10 commandments. When Benjamin's brought and Joseph wants to be with him privately to reveal to him who he is, Joseph says, go slaughter an animal and prepare it. So the rabbis say, well, anytime you see the word prepare, we must be talking about the Sabbath, about Shabbat, because it requires such a degree of preparation. And so this is a way of showing that Joseph honored and remembered and kept the Sabbath. This goes on and on. And it's almost as if the rabbis of this midrash are having such a great time that they don't stop with the 10 Commandments. They keep going. They add 3 more. You can see toward the bottom of the midrash where it says number 7. They throw in, do not hate your brother in your heart. Well, that's easy to connect with Joseph. They say, don't take revenge and don't bear a grudge. Also very easy in the life of Joseph. This is a very literal application of that notion of what it means to fulfill what's written in that other ark on those tablets. And I want to just suggest that this is a beautiful model of what it means to be a human embodiment of Torah. And here, just again, to appreciate what the Midrash is doing, to say that these 2 arks are carried side by side is to say that there's an equivalency between what's in one ark and what's in the other ark. It's a way of suggesting that this person whose bones are in this ark is also a kind of Torah, that these arks merit being carried side by side. So I want to look with you at something that bears some degree of similarity in the early ritual life surrounding death in the Jewish tradition, and a tradition regarding deceased Torah scholars that in the Talmud itself is somewhat controversial. I read this as a kind of, there's an existing tradition, and there is a desire to record Jewish practice, what you do when a Torah scholar dies. And but the practice isn't universally accepted, and we're privy to the debate among the rabbis about whether this should be done, whether this is still done. So look with me, we'll go to source number 6. This is also from the Babylonian Talmud, Tractate Bavakama. And the rabbis are talking here initially about what happened when King Hezekiah, Hezekiah, who was the king of Judah and a particularly righteous king of Judah at the end of the 8th century BCE. When he died, what did they do for him? So first, we will skip over the first part of this source, but it has to do with bearing shoulders. But there seems to be, well, no, they also did this for Ahab, who was an evil king. So there must have been something special that they did when King Hezekiah died. And they say, and this is toward the bottom of the page that you're seeing on your screen, about 6 lines up. Rather, the honor that was done for Hezekiah was that they laid a Torah scroll upon his bier, and they said, this one fulfilled that which is written in this. It's almost a parallel. They don't cite the Midrash about Joseph's bones, but it's so close, except it's not just a Midrash. It becomes, it's a ritualization that when he died, they put a Torah scroll either on the bed in which he was lying or on a bier, some kind of platform which held him. And they said he fulfilled what's written in this. And then the Gemara explores, so what's the life of this tradition of putting a Torah scroll on the bier of a great person who is deceased? So the Gemara asks, but nowadays as well, we do this for any great Torah scholar that dies. So what's so unique about Hezekiah? And then they talk about, well, we don't do it exactly this way. Now they're saying nowadays, here we're talking probably about the 4th or 5th century. And they're saying, no, we already don't do it this way. And there's an internal Talmudic disagreement about, well, what do we do for deceased Torah scholars? One opinion is that we don't place the Sefer Torah on the bed, but we do say this one fulfilled what's written in this Torah scroll. Or another opinion is we do place the Torah on their deathbed or on their bier, but we don't say this one has fulfilled what's written in this. So there is there's a powerful ritual enactment here that also, even though there's a debate within the Talmud about exactly how we do this nowadays, the Talmud understands that there was rich meaning for this kind of scripted ritual in which a Torah scroll is placed on the bed of a deceased, again, because of the correspondence, because of the way in which, and wanting to demonstrate the way in which this person fulfilled what's written in the Torah. When we go to the next text, we're text number 7. This is kind of a continuation of trying to figure out, well, what is the practice today? And there is this is kind of a continuation of the controversy over it. But there's a very strong desire here to figure out a way halachically to do some form of this ritual enactment that the deceased person was like a Torah scroll. So let me pause here, and I'm just going to look in the chat. I don't think there's anything in the chat, but I'm interested in a few reactions, responses, questions, just about what we've set up so far. First, the Midrash with these.
You're muted. You got muted.
Thank you. First, the 2 arcs being carried side by side. Second, this ritual of placing a Torah scroll on the bier or the bed of the deceased to emphasize this one fulfilled what's written in this one. Any reactions, responses, questions? I think that one of the, here, Mira says, did they just place the scroll for a moment, or was the Torah scroll buried with the person? So it was not buried with the person. It's a great question. It was placed as part of this ritual. And it seems to be, we're kind of listening in on the Talmudic discussion of how can we effectively and permissibly represent the notion that a person was the embodiment of Torah in their life. And Rabbi Perman it's a very interesting question, right? Of why books placed why Sfarim, holy books placed in the Geniza are buried with someone who died. And in a way, I didn't really make that connection, but that is when the Gemara says, well, nowadays we do it this way, we would kind of continue that and say, well, nowadays there is a custom of burying sacred books which can no longer be used with the deceased. I love that. I love that connection. So I want to
Rabbi, sorry,
yes.
There's a question in the chat, but also Susan raised her hand, I think, and I unmuted her. If she has a question, she can ask it.
Oh, great, great. Susan, please. Susan?
Okay, Susan, well, if you want to ask your question, you could put it in the chat and we'll get to it. You can go ahead, Rabbi, and there's some other questions as well.
That I know of, there is not an analogous ritual for the burial of Torah scholars today. The only thing that I could think of is the custom, and I actually don't know enough about its origin or how pervasive it is. But many of you, I'm sure this will be familiar to you, the custom with Torah scholars or certain notable Jewish leaders of having the funeral procession pass by the synagogue and opening the doors of the synagogue. So that might be some kind of contemporary connection. Great, thank you, thank you. I want to, let's continue to the next text, in which we have a much more tragic illustration of the connection between a human being and a Torah scroll, and the way in which a human being is an embodiment of Torah. Here I want to turn to text number 9. So I'll just set the context for this. The rabbis discussed in this sugya, in this section that we're looking at, are among the 10 martyrs who we name and study and read on Yom Kippur in Ela Ezkara, part of Musaf for Yom Kippur. And the context of this is the Hadrianic Persecution, where the teaching of Torah was forbidden, and both the teacher and the student suffered the penalty of death if they taught Torah. And this, we're about to read the story of Rabbi Hanina ben Teradion. So I'll read this with you. It's a troubling text, and we'll stop along the way to talk a little bit about the way in which this story is told very carefully. The sages said, not even a few days passed before Rabbi Yosei ben Kisma died of his illness, and all the Roman notables went to bury him, and they eulogized him with a great eulogy. We won't have time today to focus on that, but just to say that there were rabbis that had different relationships with Rome, and Rome had different relationships with the rabbis. Upon their return, they found Rabbi Hanina ben Teradion, who was sitting and engaging in Torah study and convening assemblies in public with a Torah scroll placed in his lap. This is very important to the way that this story is told and to this bigger theme that we're developing. Rabbi Hanina ben Teradion deserved to teach Torah with a Torah sitting on his lap. It's a way in which the storyteller, the narrator in this Talmudic passage, wants us to really understand the way in which Rabbi Hanina ben Teradion and the Torah really are one. That there is a deep connection between them. That Rabbi Hanina ben Teradion is an embodiment of the Torah that he holds. That he holds the Torah literally as well as figuratively. I'll continue with the text. They brought him to be sentenced, and they wrapped him in the Torah scroll and encircled him with bundles of branches, and they set fire to it. Now, part of what I think is so striking in this incredibly tragic story is that the Romans are probably unwittingly demonstrating to Rabbi Hanina ben Teradion's followers, demonstrating to the readers of this story or those who pass the story on, exactly who he is. To wrap him in a Torah scroll might have been for the Romans a sign of disgrace. But for Rabbi Hanina ben Teradion and for us, it's a sign that he is an embodiment of Torah. He is literally and figuratively wrapped in Torah. And they brought tufts of wool and soaked them in water and placed them on his heart so that his soul should not leave his body quickly, but he would die slowly and painfully. The story wants to emphasize the utter cruelty of the Roman occupiers here and rulers. His daughter said to him, "Father, must I see you like this?" Rabbi Hanina ben Teradion said to her, "If I alone were being burned, it would be difficult for me. But now that I am burning along with a Torah scroll, he who will seek retribution for the insult accorded to the Torah scroll will also seek retribution for the insult accorded to me. Let me just unpack that. What's he saying? He's saying that if I alone were being burned, then that would be hard. But the fact that I'm wrapped in a Torah scroll means that God, who will take notice of the Torah scroll being burnt, will now take notice of me being burnt. And it is, this statement is simultaneously a tremendous statement of humility on his part, as if God wouldn't take notice of his death, even in all his accomplishments and his greatness and the disciples that he raised and taught. It's a statement of humility, but it's also, again, I think in the way that this story is constructed, trying to emphasize to us the degree to which he and the Torah are one. They are going to suffer the same fate. They shared a life together, Rabbi Hanina ben Teradion and the Torah, and now they're going to share a death together. They're going to share suffering together. His students said to him, "Our teacher, what do you see?" And Rabbi Hanina ben Teradion said to them, "I see the parchment burning, but its letters are flying to the heavens." Beautiful. Even in this moment, Rabbi Hanina ben Teradion, who is being tortured to death, is consoling his students. He's saying to them, "I see the letters of this Torah scroll rising to heaven." And of course, the parallel, he's too modest to make it, but I think his students understand that Rabbi Hanina ben Teradion's soul is much like the letters on the parchment. And just like the parchment will be burned, but the letters will ascend to heaven, his body will be burned, but his soul will ascend to heaven. And they say to him, his students, "You too should open your mouth and the fire will enter you," meaning you will die quickly. In other words, don't prolong this. Open your mouth, take in the fire, and end your life. And his response to them, he's teaching Torah to them, even in this moment. Rabbi Hanina ben Teradion said to them, "It is preferable that he who gave me my soul should take it away, and one should not harm oneself to speed death." In his rejection of his students' compassionate suggestion that he die sooner and that he somehow allows himself to die, he rejects that. And what's he doing? Again, he's teaching them Torah. He's teaching them that that one cannot hasten their death, that it's up to God when his soul should be taken. So in this final moment, in his debate with his students, he is also becoming a living Torah. He's dying, and he is, because he's still alive at this moment, he's giving over. He's transmitting Torah to his students. The story continues. We'll just scroll down a little further and on to the next page. The executioner said to him, "My teacher," right? The executioner calls him my rabbi. "If I increase the flame," this is the Roman executioner, "if I increase the flame and take off the tufts of wool from your heart so that you will die sooner and suffer less, will you bring me to life of the world to come?" Rabbi Hanina ben Teradion said to the executioner, "Yes." The executioner said, "Take an oath for me. I'm going to make you swear that this is the case." Rabbi Hanina ben Teradion took the oath for him, and the executioner immediately increased the flame and took off the tufts of wool from his heart, causing his soul to leave his body. Joe will just scroll down a little more. Thank you. The executioner too leaped and fell in or jumped into the fire and died. A divine voice, a bat kol, emerged and said, "Rabbi Hanina ben Teradion and the executioner are destined for life of the world to come." Upon hearing this, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi wept and said, "There is one who acquires his share of the world to come in one moment, and there is one who acquires his share of the world to come only after many years of toil." So this is a troubling and incredibly rich story. What do we make of the executioner? He has a kind of a last-minute conversion, as it were. Somehow in this act of compassion, he acts in a way that is contrary to his role as a Roman executioner, right? His job is to have Rabbi Hanina ben Teradion suffer, and something changes in him, and presumably Rabbi Hanina ben Teradion is able to sense his sincerity, and he wants to be guaranteed by him that he'll have a place in the world to come. And ultimately, we have kind of an inverse situation. Rabbi Hanina ben Teradion wouldn't shorten his own life for even a moment by breathing in the fire. He tells his students, "I can't do that. It's up to God." And essentially, we have this Roman executioner committing suicide. And yet we're told by the Talmud, or by the bat kol, by this divine voice, this heavenly voice, that they both inherit life in the world to come. Maybe there's a message here that it's never too late, and one can always change their ways. There is a message here about how quintessential the quality of compassion is in Jewish life, that this executioner was compassionate for one moment, and just on that basis, he merited the world to come. This week's parasha is Lech Lecha. Avraham Avinu is the model of compassion, ish chasid, ish chesed. And here we have maybe there's something that the rabbis are telling us here about the absolute importance of loving kindness and compassion. And the ending message, I want to treat in a little bit of a different way. I think upon a first reading of this, it's there's something that feels very unjust and unfair about this. Rabbi Hanina ben Teradion spent his whole life inheriting the world to come, whereas this Roman executioner got that reward in just a minute of effort or labor. But I think there might be a different way of reading this, which is that we're emphasizing here we are emphasizing here the way in which when Rabbi Yehuda Nasi says that Rabbi Hanina ben Teradion acquired the world to come after many years of toil, I think we're meant to understand that as a zchut, as a privilege. This is meant to be another reminder of us, in case we didn't get it from Rabbi Hanina ben Teradion being wrapped in a Torah scroll, and we didn't get it from Rabbi Hanina ben Teradion holding a Torah scroll on his lap as he taught. This is another way of saying to us, Rabbi Hanina ben Teradion was a human Torah because he spent his whole life engaged in the world of Torah. Yes, he merits the world to come, and the executioner merits the world to come, but there's something even bigger than that. That's not the only goal, is life in the world to come. The goal is to become an embodiment of Torah. So I want to say a few closing words. I'm looking at the chat, and yes, I'm happy to make the source sheet available, and I'm sure my friends and colleagues, Rabbi Amy Bardak and her team are happy to share the source sheet. I want to connect all of this with this day and this second yard site, this second anniversary. The 11 victims of the attack are all martyrs. They were all embodiments of Torah in their deaths. It was Shabbat morning. They were in a synagogue. They were holding Sidurim, prayer books. But they were also, each of them in different ways, embodiments of Torah in their lives. And I think in some ways this model of Hanina ben Teradion is a very powerful one because of both of those pieces, that he embodied Torah in his life and he embodied Torah in his death. And we can think about these images that the various sources that we looked at tried to hold up this model of living your life in a way in which you will be a Torah scroll, that it can you can merit being carried through life side by side with the Torah. So that symbolically, yes, we show that in death, and we have this ritual of placing a Torah scroll on the bed of the deceased scholar. We have Joseph and his bones being carried side by side with the Ark of the Covenant. We're paying tribute to the memory of those who were living embodiments of Torah, both in their death, but also in their life. And I want to go back to, by way of concluding, to the first, to take you back. We don't have to look at the text together, but to take you back to the first set of texts about this scene of these two arks being carried side by side, one with Joseph's bones and one with the 10 Commandments. There is a way of holding on to the past that can be can have a negative connotation, right? Even that expression in English of holding on to the past suggests a kind of a way of being stuck, a way of not being able to move on. But I think that midrash of Joseph's bones being carried by the children of Israel for 40 years through the desert presents us with an alternative model of how we can hold on to the past. That it is possible to hold on to the past in a way that leads us forward, that helps us through all those years in the wilderness. There's a way of holding on to what happened that can ultimately bring us to the promised land and can bring us home. And I think in many ways, Pittsburgh and the entire Jewish world and the larger world are being carried forward by these living Torahs, being carried forward, and by the reminder that each of these precious human lives was an embodiment of Torah. And by memorializing them in the incredibly moving ways that you are doing through study and service, we're like that ark carrying Joseph's bones. We're not stuck, but we're holding on to that past in a way that will move us forward and take us home. Yehi zichram baruch, may their memory be an eternal blessing.
I want to thank you, Rabbi Leon Morris, for your inspiring words and teaching today. And we are going to close with Kaddish D'Rabbanan, led by Carol Black in memory of her brother, Richard Gottfried, Zichrono Livracha. A link to the text is in the chat. We're going to keep the faces on the screen so we can see 10 faces for our interpretation of a Zoom minion. Please rise if you are able.
Yiskadal v'yiskadash shemei rabah. Yom adivra hirutei v'yamlik malchutei. V'chaye hon of yomei hon of chaye dechol beit Yisrael. Ba'agalov v'zman karev yimru mein.
Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabban Levarach Leolam Lo Me'om.
Yisbarach v'yishtabach v'yisbar v'yisramam v'yisnaseh. V'yisadar v'yisaleh v'yisalal shemei dekudasha barichu. La'ela mim kol birchotav v'shirotav tush b'chotav v'nechematav damiram b'yoma v'yamru amen.
Amen.
Al Yisrael v'yal Rabbanon v'yal Tamidehon v'yal kol Tamidehon v'yal kol mond oskin b'iraita divihadra hadei v'di b'chol atar v'yatar Yehei lachon achon shlom rabba hina v'histahol v'rachamim v'chayin arihun imazon aricha ufakuna mikadam avuim divi shemaya v'yamru amen.
Amen.
Yehei shlomo rabba min shemaya v'chayin tovim aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael v'yamru amen.
Amen.
Yasei shalom b'namav hu barachamav yasei shalom aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael v'yamru amen.
Thank you, Carol. May the memories of all those we remember today be for a blessing. To view the commemorative ceremony tonight at 7 p.m., please go to the 1027 Healing Partnership website. That's 1027healingpartnership.org, and it will live stream from there at 7. And more Torah study will be offered on the Hebrew Yard site November 4th and 5th. Good day, everyone.